Hello, everyone, and welcome to our spiritual dialogue time. This is Rev Neusom RevAna Quintana. If this is your first time, we highly encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And we've been having really interesting conversations, and hopefully today there'll be another one for the world.
For the world.
Actually, Neusom, this week, probably it's happening to you, and most people who are online, we keep getting a lot of stuff, right? Or courses that is being offered, or friends that are emailing us with reflections, articles, so on. Well, I was looking for some other email, and I ran into one that I had overlooked from one of our minister friends. And it was on this New Thought writer Emma Curtis Hopkins, and she was talking about the process of chemicalization, which is a process that I think any person going into a deeper spiritual process will have to go through. I'm sure you have gone through a chemicalization process, right? Have you?
Yeah. So my experience with the chemicalization, I'll get to in a minute, but I just want to say that it was in the early Unity material and the stuff before, like Emma Curtis Hopkins, chemicalization was a common subject. And somehow over the course of the years, we stopped talking about it. And I think it would be a wise thing, as Anna was saying, to bring it back in, because it does explain something that happens to many people who are on the spiritual path. Chemicalization is that when you make a change, a deep spiritual change, there is left over inside your system an opposing thought to that, an opposing way of being. And as that dies off or sloughs off, typically in a chemicalization, you would have either something in your world would begin to go badly, or you might feel sick. And I can tell you, when I was in ministerial school, so we did ministerial school in Missouri, and one of the things I was dealing with when I went there was a sense of low self-esteem and a sense of being, in some ways, a loser at the time. So it's, one of the things that happens as a ministerial student is you're kind of elevated to a different status. Right. And you're kind of taught to think of yourself as a spiritual being, as a whole and happy human being, and all that. And I think that must have been taking root in my system. In my second year, I had this experience of a fever, which was not caused by anything obvious. It wasn't like the flu or a cold. I had no other symptoms. I just had a fever. I mean, a fever so hot that I slept on a mat on the floor, and it felt like 30 minutes to think about getting up. This lasted 3 days. Nobody seemed to care. Nobody. My wife at the time, nobody on staff, nobody. It was like everybody understood I was going through a process of sloughing off the old way of thinking about myself. And when it was over, I was okay. I mean, no worse for wear. I do remember an interesting thing happened during this. My mind slowed down so much, I could watch the building of thoughts. I could watch how they came in. The image I had was like bricks. Brick, 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 thought, thought, thought. And then a windshield wiper, wiping them out, then a thought. And it was, I've never been that slowed down by anything.
It's almost probably, it must have felt like how patterns of thinking or belief were being dissolved, right?
But they didn't just dissolve. When they dissolved, you had this toxin that was left over from them. And it was a cleansing process, but and I think the reason we don't bring it up, I think the reason it's kind of fallen out of favor is people get afraid. oh, something terrible might happen to me. But you probably had something like that too.
Yeah. I was thinking as I'm hearing you that when I moved from Puerto Rico to Raleigh and had been physically healed from the cancer, but just coming into, it's almost like a higher place in awareness. It's almost like if you're operating on a building and you're on first floor or second, and then being jumped to a higher place, it almost feels like nausea, like a reaction where now, and a lot of this stuff it's not that noticeable in terms of like the mind going, oh, I'm changing because of this, but it feels like a new you coming in, and the old you finally leaving, and it's a process of release. And I'm thinking, Neusom, that isn't this what in a way, many of us feel that our spiritual path is a path of release, that we're not really acquiring that much, but letting go of what we have built.
Well, I do think you're right. I mean, there's to come back to the two paths, there's the positiva and the negativa. And the negativa is the one where you let go of stuff.
Right.
And, so we say positiva when we say affirmations, I am healthy, I'm wise, I'm loving, etc. And the path of negativa is, like Anna said, you got to let go of something for that to take root. And when you let go of it, you may have a process that is unpleasant. And it will only last a little while. It's not a lifelong thing. It's like having a cold or a fever. It will come and go.
And this is what we should all keep in mind, that as we go through that, the aftermath of the whole process, it's really a new you. It's really a you that is in more alignment to your actual divine I am, Christ presence. But it's almost like a crucifixion, we could say.
Yeah. I think in many ways they have compared it to that.
Yeah.
And so it's like, one of the word plays that Unity is used often around the crucifixion is it's the crossing out of the ego, which I thought I've often had issues with that choice of words, but it is a chemicalization process when you cross out your ego, essentially. And so it's a good thing, but it's not something you really enjoy. I know this is a stretch, but the ayahuasca ceremonies that they have in South America, where people take this hallucinogen, many of them have an instantaneous chemicalization process right there. They throw up, they have diarrhea, they feel terrible things, but when they come out of it, they feel like something has been released and they are fresh again.
Neusom, as I'm hearing you explaining your own process, and I'm connecting with mine, which I think it's not like a one-time thing. It could be many times in your process of evolution. But something that I have realized, at least for myself, that as we commit to being spiritual leaders and to say, hey, I'm here to support others in their own process, it means that we are going to be, at least for me, and you probably agree with me, that we're taking on a more, as I would say, more intense process. Just because how can we really support others? And we can, like you were saying in a former talk, we don't need to be perfect in order to help others. We can still do it in our imperfection. But what has come to me is that as I have dealt with my own demons or insecurities or error thinking, I'm purifying myself so that when I'm there to support another person, I can know better what it's all about, and I can be that point of reference that says it's all okay.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. I would just encourage people to reconsider some of the traumas in your life, some of the negatives. This is another way of doing that, is that we look at hurdles or difficulties or pain or suffering that we've had as though they're all negative. And it often is the case, it's part of this transformational process. And in many ways, it starts like this. You're going along at this level. You feel a trauma, a change that you didn't like. That begins you on a spiritual quest that will carry you up. And somewhere along the line, you will have made a spiritual change in your self-definition as much as anything. And then you will feel the chemicalization of that. And then you're free. You have actually made the transition complete now to another level of awareness or being. And in your case, you have multiple motives, your own and your position, to make those moves.
And I was thinking, as you're saying that it might feel like the end of the world, or the mystics would call it the dark night of the soul, but it's really the perception of the ego going through that, because that's all we can see. But as we look back, we start connecting the dots, and we see the beauty of all of that process, all of their processes, because it's brought us to where we needed to be.
Don't you think, Anna, that all the problems that we have are really the problems of the small self?
Yeah.
That's the one who has the problems. The big self
It's like,
doesn't have a problem. You broke a leg, it's not a problem. You just broke your leg. To the small self, it's like, oh my God, something's happened to me. I'm not the same as I was before, or this hurts, or something like that. It really doesn't, the big side doesn't really care. But it just wants you to become more like it.
Right.
In this lifetime. And so, most of its suffering is still in the small self. So if you're wondering, why am I suffering? Because you're in the small self. That's why you're suffering. Not because it happened to you, but because that's the point of view you're taking. The little one is taking that point of view.
And then as we start evolving, then we might still go through a hard moment, but we start learning how to shift. And then shifting to that other space within can still, it will not prevent us from going through what we need to go through, but it will definitely change the experience.
Right.
And we can be like basking in what is.
And that's why, some spiritual teachers will say your troubles are your teachers.
Right.
Because they teach you where you're stuck in this little self, and your whole job in this lifetime on a spiritual path is to go become the big self.
And this time of the coronavirus virus pandemic is that we're doing it collectively at one level or the other. Neusom. I really feel that we are being called to step forth, to step out, to step into our greatness, and once and for all.
Yeah, well, you won't be once and for all, I guarantee you that. But that'd be nice. It'd be like, boom, we did it.
Right.
But it's the same kind of thought process. I used to say, in 6 months we'll have this completed. Well, that'll just be the beginning of something else. It's not the end ever. And I would like to, on a very dollars and cents kind of way of saying this, one of the things we've heard for decades now is that there is global warming, and that there's too much carbon in the atmosphere, and now beginning too much methane because it's melting, et cetera. All this is happening, and the crisis is upon us. I mean, it is hurricanes,
imminent,
if nothing else, should be telling us we're in a serious situation, and the Greenland ice melting, and et cetera. It's a big deal. And we've always thought, well, we don't have the will to do it. That appears to be baloney. We took several $1 trillion and shut down a country over a virus. The survival of everyone should be able to command at least that much attention. So I do think if we would just go, we can do this, and we will do this, we will have a cathartic experience like we've never had when we finally realize that we're part of this thing called life and not separate from it.
And that's what we're holding.
Yep.
We're standing together holding that truth for ourselves and for the world, and not resisting what needs to happen, what needs to be. ultimately, all will be well and all is well.
Yeah, it'll happen. So as you go through this week, contemplate where you have made improvements over the course of your life and what has brought you to that state. Has it been a difficulty? Has it been a disappointment of some sort? And see if that pattern isn't working out in your life. And then if it happens to you again, you can go, so I've been here before.
Remember what Rumi loved to culminate this dialogue with a phrase from Rumi that says, I love it, I say it all the time, it's the good that you are seeking is seeking you. And that good might not show up the way the small self would like to see it, but just trust that it's good, it will be good, and that good is coming your way.
Yeah. Have a great week.
Namaste.
Namaste.